Okay, so Lake Highlands area moms and more against racism. This morning, you guys came together and we put together this is just some of the art that went in the bags. And we've got kiddos adding art to them tomorrow, but about 12 wonderful bags. And the bags were so full, we had to do 2 bags per family, lots of food and soap and books and chips and salsa to say welcome to Texas to our Afghan new neighbors, refugee families. But Anuba and I from the board wanted to delve a little deeper into what it means to be a refugee, a migrant, and to an organization that helps refugees and migrants all the time, not just right now. So we are talking to Felix Villalobos. See? Felix Villalobos from a wonderful organization, if you haven't heard of it, and we'll attach all of this below, RAICES. And that stands for, let me get this right, it's RAICES, and that is refugee, okay, I already forgot the A.
It's okay, it is a long acronym. I think sometimes we do a pop quiz with our staff and sometimes they themselves forget.
You tell us.
Yeah, so RAICES stands for Refugee and Immigrant Center for Education and Legal Services.
Okay,
or
it was
RAICES for
the
short.
and that tripped me up. Refugee and immigrant. Okay.
And so RAICES has been around since the 80s here in Texas. It grew out of a really small office that was mainly focused on asylum seekers that were coming in during the 80s, and it's quickly grown. I joined RAICES here in the Dallas office when it opened up a Dallas office in 2015, and I've been with them since. And RAICES does a little bit of everything in the immigration context. So we provide legal representation for unaccompanied minors. Those are the children that are coming to the border by themselves. We also work with the generic type of immigration that most people know, like naturalization, family petitions, DACA. We also provide legal representation for those in immigration court that are either fighting for asylum or other cases, so representation in removal proceedings. And we also have a litigation arm where we take up lawsuits through appeals as well. And we also provide representation to detained families in various detention centers in Texas. So we've grown quite a bit to be able to provide services in many of those areas. We also have an advocacy arm, and we also have a social services arm because we've understood that many of our clients need a source of referral and may not have the knowledge or the finances to be able to do that. And so all of that is encapsulated within RAICES, but the other department that has been much more involved lately is our refugee resettlement department. And we have one in San Antonio. That's our main office in which we work through refugee resettlement. Here in Dallas, there are many other nonprofits that also have refugee resettlement, such as RST, RAC, Mosaic, many more Catholic charities that take on refugees that arrive.
So can I ask a question, Felix?
Yes, please.
So today, I saw on NPR this news about a toddler and an infant that were found at the Rio Grande, sort of the banks of the river. And, there's obviously on all sides of the debate, there are people, somebody abandoned them, but they were really well cared for. It's clear that they're just waiting to be found here. So what would you do for these children? Like, would RAICES be involved from this point on? Or, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to children, the government has to treat them a little bit different, and they do treat them different than an adult male or a whole family. And so the first thing that we normally look at when it's just children is how did the government start their process? For everybody under 18, typically if they are not near a parent or a guardian, they're going to be designated as what's called a UAC, or an unaccompanied minor. And all that means is they will be sent to a children's shelter along with other minors until the process becomes where they find either a family member in the US or somebody related close enough that they can be released to that adult or guardian, who will then make sure that the child meets their duties. For example, in the US, to attend school, right? That's something that children are supposed to do. But regardless of how they're found, with or without their parents, the government puts them into immigration court for removal proceedings. So even if they're minors, the government is trying to deport them through the proper procedures. And typically, RAICES, we do operate within certain children's shelters, or we provide legal representation after released, and provide legal representation in immigration court, and see where we can assist in that regard, along with social services. So in the example that you gave, 2 children not found near their parents, CBP or ICE would take custody of them, take them to a shelter. And there are many children's shelters throughout the United States, not just in Texas. And depending on what shelter they arrive to, the nonprofit providing legal services to that shelter would be the one to provide those legal services.
And so, Felix, several years ago, America's attention was on the horrible photos of children in cages and stuff at the border happening in those facilities. I'm sure you all were involved in that. I wouldn't just follow up and say, now our attention has been on Afghan refugees. What should we know about what's still happening at the border? What do you still need? How are those families doing? What's the status?
The Afghan families?
Well, both of them. I don't want to forget about what's happening at the border.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see what media highlights, but I will say in general, all the immigration needs that we are typically providing services for haven't changed. They've always been there. They just aren't capturing the attention of the media. The wave of unaccompanied minors or children coming to the US because they don't have any other options, they can't stay in their home country, they don't have a future there, that surge probably really came about since 2014, and it's never ended. It's continued. It ebbs and flows. Some months the numbers may increase, but unaccompanied minors continue to come seeking refuge. The families down south of the border continue to seek asylum or receive representation. And RAICES has been involved in providing legal representation to all the families that we can. There's only so much we can do as per capacity. And so that continues. Now, on top of all of that, we've been involved as well with the Afghan crisis. And it's been an interesting situation, because for most Afghanis, when they provide assistance to the United States, either to the military or to other nonprofits, the biggest category usually being interpreters for the military. Once they provide a certain amount of service, they are eligible to apply for a visa for themselves and their immediate family members. And all that process usually happens in their home country. It takes quite a bit of time. It's not something that happens within a few months. But once it's completed properly, then they're given a visa and they're allowed to come to the United States. And once they arrive here, they receive residency for themselves and their family for the service they provided. The Afghan crisis caused that people had to leave sooner before the process completed, and that's thrown a wrench into their processes. Even at this time, we don't know how that's going to play out. We've been in communication with the government to find out what kind of exceptions it may make in those processes, and they have told us we'll figure that out later. Because normally when somebody moves during their immigration process, you are deemed to have abandoned it, so they cancel the applications. And so we're trying to prevent that. We have seen that many families have been split up because so many people were trying to get on airplanes to physically leave Afghanistan. And so what we've seen is we have found where maybe there's a father that makes it on an airplane because they had all their paperwork, the passport, the visa ready to go, but their spouse and their children weren't able to get on the airplane because they didn't have their passport or their Afghan ID ready to go. So They normally go through the Refugee Resettlement Department. And for us, we have the one in San Antonio. We've been in communication with that department because normally when they receive a family or an individual, all the legal work has been completed, like I mentioned earlier. So all they're dealing with, which is more than enough, is actual providing of finances and housing and clothing and acclimation to a new society and trying to get them a driver's license as a social security card so they can start working to provide for their own families. And so on top of that, people are arriving without all those processes completed. So we've been meeting and we've been creating capacity where we can, even though we're still providing legal assistance to all the other groups that we've mentioned, to try and provide consultations and legal representation for those individuals and families who still have family members back in Afghanistan. And so information as to how we can help them changes by the day, literally. The cutoff of airplane flights is probably one of the biggest problems we've seen because at one point, the airplanes were allowing a variety of people into the airplane. And in their mindset is, I just need to get out of this country. I can figure out my immigration status later. And so once the flight stopped for a short while and they keep on stopping and going, the following alternatives were, well, the embassy in Afghanistan has closed. If I have any chance at all, is I need to physically get myself out of Afghanistan some other way. And so we have seen many people trying to leave the country to other neighboring countries. So Iran, Qatar, Tajikistan, Pakistan, many other places in hopes that they can continue the process and come to the United States because many of them already have somebody here and they just weren't able to come together as a family group. And it's a very complicated situation because not all of the countries are necessarily cooperating, and they also changed their position. The Taliban themselves have also changed position as well. At one point, they were going to allow flights to come in, and then they said no. They're putting up roadblocks throughout the country. That happened pretty much immediately before the flight stopped the first time around. So just simply trying to travel to the airport has a pretty big risk because it's understood in general that if you're trying to get to the airport, you were probably providing some kind of service to the military. And if you were providing service to the US, you probably weren't helping us, the Taliban. So it's an either or, you're either for us or against us. And so it's a very dangerous situation. So our main focus has been to immediately understand what immigration situations were already pending, and then also attempting what's called humanitarian parole. And humanitarian parole is a very interesting thing because humanitarian parole has always existed. The US has always had the authority to let an individual in at a one-on-one basis. But in general, most humanitarian paroles have been historically denied. Most humanitarian paroles usually came in through the southern border and were rarely granted. We have noticed that for Afghani cases, they have relaxed the standard that they used before, but it has taken a really long time. I submitted some humanitarian parole applications maybe around the week that the air flight stopped the first time around, and those are still pending. So paperwork takes a really long time. Well, for a person that's in Afghanistan, it's not fast enough because they're having to make daily decisions on, do I go out of my house or not? Do I attempt to travel to leave the country or not? With the hope that they can continue the process later on. So it's a very messy situation. I'm on several email groups with other attorneys where we're trying to keep each other updated just so we can figure out what's the next step. But we are pretty much just trying anything and everything with the main focus being, let's get them out of the country. And then let's, at the same time, once they do arrive, focus on providing them the basic needs, which by law, they have a right to. For anybody that arrives as a refugee, they get limited financial assistance, housing, clothing, but you can only imagine the stress that they're going through right now when they're trying to settle into a new life, but at the same time trying to figure out how can I get my family over to the US. So it's all over the place.
Mm-hmm. So is humanitarian parole similar to what we understand as seeking asylum, or is that different?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so it is different. By the law, humanitarian parole is for a person that seeks immediate or urgent entry into US for a certain reason. And it usually is valid for up to about a year, but you can renew humanitarian parole until you no longer need it. When you seek asylum, you're specifically seeking entry into the US and protection in the US with the understanding that you can't return to your home country ever because somebody in the home country or the country itself, the government, is trying to attack or threaten or kill you. Applying for asylum is fairly easy, but winning is very, very hard. The probability of winning a general asylum claim is usually less than 25%. So what we tell persons, depending on their situation, is you obviously want to apply for any and all applications, but you can only apply for asylum once you're in the US. Humanitarian parole is something you would try to apply for while you're outside the US. And there are situations where you may be able to apply for both, and we would counsel them to do so. But the main focus for most people in Afghanistan is getting out of Afghanistan and making it to the US to then kind of sort out which, if not both options that they want to apply for.
So Felix, when I was looking at your website, RAICES website, and under take action, one of the items, so I'll share these with our group. You click on and it explains ending MPP, that's the Remain in Mexico policy. Can you tell us about that and how you want us to take action on that?
Yeah, so that MPP is the Migrant Protection Protocols is one of those interesting things where the Trump administration created and used to return families back to Mexico to await their turn to apply for asylum. Okay. We know that with immigration court and asylum processes, they take a really long time. Typically, a person would be either placed in a detention center or released in the US to await their turn. But with MPP, they basically rewrote the situation to, we're going to give you a chance to apply for asylum, but you're going to wait in Mexico while you wait your turn. And so that's been very dangerous. Northern Mexico has always had its problems with cartels and violence. And so grouping even more people there has just put them in a position to be victims. And so when the Biden administration came in, we really thought that one of the things that they would do commonsensically would be to simply scrap the program, which they sort of did. But as you may have seen in the news lately, they've kind of brought back. And so one of the things that RAICES has been doing through our litigation department is to sue. And we've had some successes with that. But what we've also seen is that Biden administration has kind of shifted ways to continue the effects of that by calling it different things like Title 42, or pointing to other laws that would allow them to continue doing that. So what can the average citizen do to really, help highlight this is, I think, first of all, is highlighting it to our politicians and to others to basically let them understand like this, it's not an efficient way to use our resources as a government to process these applications, because that's what it really is, right? We're basically telling people, we're still going to process your application. We just need you to wait outside. That's very inefficient. Now, all of that can be done while in the US. Understanding the financials angles of it, because I see that being a very common argument against immigration, is very important as well, because once somebody understands that there's really the benefits of an immigrant coming to the US is greater than the cost. Most families that come to the US are willing to start working and providing for their families right away. They're not looking for a handout or to get free assistance. They want to provide for their families and start a life here. And so when you force everybody to return back to Mexico, it has other negative effects as well. So I think in general, it's informing the general population of what is actually happening, the negatives of it, and then of course reaching out to our politicians to let them know this, and MPP, and let's go back to the process that worked before very well.
Anuba, you're an immigrant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Felix,
Yes.
are you an immigrant?
So I was born in the United States, but my
Okay.
parents were immigrants. Yeah.
Okay, so when you said, I like what you said about how welcoming immigrants will add more, and benefits our country more than it costs us. What in what other ways do you feel that way? You said, you know, people come and they're ready to work and give back. I just am curious about your take on that.
Yeah, I think in general, you can consider that immigrants are the lifeblood of this country. Even from a historical perspective, there have always been waves of persons that have wanted to come to the United States because of the perceived ability to better their life and their family. And that's always proven true. The data shows that immigrants do build careers. They want to work. They're not here for handouts. At the same time, the law has been crafted in a way so that they cannot receive handouts. Those born in the US or that have legal status of some sort are the ones that are typically able to receive some kind of benefit for a short time, but not those that have simply arrived and do not have legal status. We have seen in general that immigrant populations, when they have the ability to work, which by the way, usually means they have to apply for it on a regular basis, not something that's automatic, use it to be able to work, to be able to get a social security card, to be able to drive legally. And all those I think are great benefits to the country. I think we've also seen that the mixing of different type of ethnicities and immigrants, where would they end up going, provide for an enriching of culture and society as well for those regions. So there are many, many positives. I know many times somebody will point to a negatives. For example, they may point to crime or cost or things like that. But when you look at the data, it isn't as if 1% of all the crime is caused by 100% of only immigrants. That's absolutely not true. And same thing with the cost on infrastructure or things like that. It's again, the positives always outweigh the negatives. But I know for myself on an individual level, my parents came, they're from Mexico, and they came to the United States for a better life. And I was lucky to be born here. And they always instilled in me a good work ethic and taking advantage of everything that the US provides, like a free education, which many other countries don't provide. The ability to gain a profession despite where they may have come from or what status they may have had in their own country. And all those were great attributes that are taught here in the United States, is that working hard can create a great life for in the United States. And that's why people come to the United States, because they want to be able to work hard and have that for themselves as well.
What do you think, Anuba? I agree with you, Felix.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. All of that. I think for me, this country is so unique and amazing that there are people from all over the world. Really, you do not get anywhere else in the world that you can see what you see here, and the value on hard work, the value on, excellence, all of these things I think really draw people here. And I think it adds even more to the country for sure. Yeah, my child is a citizen, and I am very proud that he is, an American, and he's going to do great things like the US is doing also. So.
Yes. And I think despite the division we see in our country, at our heart is this sense of community and inclusion. And so that's what we're doing. And so Felix, if you can just share with us, because we have a heart, and all the people who are watching this have a heart for wanting to help these people that are just arriving. What more do you need from us? I'm guessing RAICES could use more money for more resources.
Yeah, I think the very simple ask is money. We also employ volunteers, but also specifically for those that are coming from Afghanistan. Through any refugee resettlement office, they accept donations in kind as well, because these families are literally arriving with nothing. It's something as simple as clothing. Something we've noticed is that although many refugee resettlement offices receive donations from a variety of places, at least I know for ours, they tend to be pretty short on children's clothing, specifically boys' clothing. And that's just the way it happens to be right now, because there are so many refugees arriving at one time. And so I do believe that, donation of money to any and all nonprofits is always beneficial because it goes straight to staff that provide that assistance, whether it's an attorney like myself that's providing legal assistance to a caseworker at the Refugee Resettlement Office that is directly working with that family to orient them to their new life. I know many nonprofits also on the refugee resettlement side need actual volunteers to help deliver those items. I've been in several meetings with our San Antonio office where they don't have enough volunteers to get the items that they receive to the families, to put together those bunk beds, to put together that dining table, to get those clothing to their homes. Because again, this person has arrived, no car, no driver's license, no social security, no job. They don't have a way to get around anywhere. And so I imagine that many of the nonprofits here in Dallas who provide the same kind of services we do in San Antonio probably have the exact same needs as well.
And I think just a reminder that even when refugees and migrants aren't in the news, that they're always arriving to our country. So organizations like yours always need support and money and volunteers. Well,
right.
Thank you so much, Felix, for joining us. What a wonderful organization. And good luck with all the families. Let us know what we can do here in Dallas, okay?
Will do.
Okay, thank you, Anuba.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, Larry.
Bye.
Bye, Felix.
Bye.